organized by us together with our international partners, Wings. This event would be impossible without our partners. This year was a big challenge for all of us, personally, for our organizations, and for our sector in general. Last year, we made an attempt to start the discussion about philanthropy in BRICS countries at our conference in the fall of last year. And we saw that actually this subject generated a lot of interest, and we realized we need to continue this conversation. We are happy that we are joined today by our colleagues from the Wings Association. Thank you all for joining our discussion today. We realize, of course, that we did a lot of work in our countries. We studied many questions, found some answers. So we would be happy to take this opportunity today to get some maybe links. If you have some materials, some publications on this subject, maybe you could share them with each other, something that you would like to recommend to other participants today. So we'll put those links on the big screen. We encourage you all to share the knowledge that you have. And we will certainly circulate them and share them with all the participants in our event today. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our moderator today. This session will be moderated by Benjamin Bellegy. And right away, I have a question for you. You are Wings Director. You supported us from the very beginning. Your association supported the idea of this research. So could you please tell us what is your vision of the potential for this idea, what we invented together with you? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sasha. And I'm really glad to be here with all of you for this extremely important discussion. And actually, to your question, Sasha, I think the importance of reflecting on what is the specificity, what is the role, what is maybe the potential contribution of philanthropy in the BRICS and also of BRICS philanthropy in the world is really a critical one. So I'm quite excited actually to engage in this conversation with you and honored to have a chance to moderate that. And of course, at Wings, we're fully supporting this type of initiative that try to find also new models to reflect on alternative cultures of giving and innovations that are happening in different parts of the world. And I think we'll have many great speakers to give us their perspectives on this today. And so as a matter of quick introduction, I'd like first to acknowledge the fact that what we've seen with this COVID-19 crisis is first an incredible surge in giving and in philanthropy in emerging market economies. That's, we've seen unprecedented levels of giving in places like Brazil, in places like China, and probably also in places like India, although I have less data available on that, but I'll say a few words about some of the data we have. And so that's actually opening maybe some sort of opportunity to showcase what is happening in these emerging economies, where the field is burgeoning, is growing very fast, and following sometimes different paths and different models. And I was mentioning that surge in donations. According to some of the numbers we have in Brazil, it seems like we had about $1 billion of donations in response to COVID, which is again completely unprecedented in a place like Brazil, where private actors are less prominent than in other parts of the world, while the public sector, the government is really in charge of the welfare. And so that's a new evolution we've seen. It was similar, I think, in China, where our member also Yishan in China has, I have the numbers from last year, probably they're much bigger now, but it was about $5 billion that they had tracked from the philanthropic sector in response to COVID-19 in China. In India, the numbers I have are just from Candid and show that we had 650 million. In Russia, actually, I don't have data, so I'll count on maybe on the Russian Donors Forum and our colleagues, if you do have some of it. And of course, the data piece is an important one to understand the trends, to understand where we're going collectively. But I know that there's been a very, very strong reaction and response from leading foundations such as the Potanin Foundation, and I know Oksana will tell us about their response. And in South Africa also, I think it's about 350 million, and there have been some very big grants also in this context. So this is really an incredible opportunity also to show a new approach to philanthropy, and there's a lot of innovation happening. If you take, for example, the Alibaba rescue package, that was interesting from Jack Ma. It was interesting to see how a philanthropist from an emerging market was actually supporting the US responding to the crisis in the very beginning, but not just through materials, but also leveraging all the power of their business and their platform to and the distribution channels and so on to really support the response. So that that's the type of innovation we've seen. We've seen also other types of innovations really on the ground, more in terms of grassroots community organization that were really interesting, including in South Africa, in Russia, in other parts of the world. So I think it's really time for us to sit down and think about what are the specificities, what are the commonalities, and again, what is maybe the role of philanthropy in the BRICS. Just as also another quick thought is that until now we've seen mainly the sort of US Western models predominantly playing this thought leadership role for philanthropy at the global level. And that has contributed to actually some interesting developments and accelerations. But at the same time, we're now in a time where a lot of the philanthropic players in emerging markets and other parts of the world feel like these models are not corresponding to their local realities, may that be in terms of culture, may that be in terms of relationship with government. And so we need to find new ways, and we need to learn from each other in the BRICS countries, in emerging markets. So that's why such discussion is really important. And again, we'll also need to think about our BRICS philanthropies ready maybe to take a more proactive role, a more leading role at the global level to provide thought leadership, to provide new models, new narratives for philanthropy across the globe. So I'll stop my few introductory remarks here because we have a fantastic panel that we want to hear today. And I also want, before introducing our great speakers, I want to start a little poll for you because we've prepared a survey, a Mentimeter survey, and thank you, Larissa, for putting this on the screen. So we have just a couple of questions for you so that we get a sense of what you think is the role of philanthropy in the BRICS, and so that we also inform our speakers as they will make their presentations. I think you have a little information here in the chat with a link to the Menti that we ask you to please click on, and that will allow you to see this question and then to answer. So the first question, once you've connected to the Menti link on the chat, is very simple. What are your expectations for BRICS philanthropies? First option is to focus really on the domestic agenda and strictly on the domestic agenda because the needs are great, of course, in these places. I think that India actually accounts for half of the SDGs worldwide in terms of gaps. So that's, that's of course the first position that is possible. The second one is saying, well, we need to focus on the domestic agenda, but we also need to increase the global leadership of BRICS philanthropies. And finally, the third option is really to prioritize actually both the domestic agenda and global leadership and global action, meaning also investing maybe cross-border and supporting social impact and social change beyond borders. So this is the question, and so I'll give you just 1 or 2 seconds. Great, interesting. That's very interesting actually to see these little numbers showing up here. With only about 10% actually of those of you who have joined us thinking that really the focus should be strictly on the domestic agenda, while actually a vast majority think that there is a role to play more globally. Really interesting. So I think that will give food for thought to our panelists today. because I think the reality is not yet this one. And so that's interesting that we can discuss how maybe to bring this to reality and sort of get BRICS philanthropy also to play this type of new role. And there's a second question. If we could show it on the screen. So what are the changes that the COVID-19 crisis should bring for the philanthropy sector in general? What kind of change would you like to see? Do you think it requires to respond to this terrible crisis? And oh, by the way, here it's open words, so we're going just to show a bit the words that are showing up. We haven't, so you can just feel free to write down the words that you feel express what needs to change. Collaboration, trust-based philanthropy, transparency, and ambition. I think that's already these four points look like an excellent agenda. New ways of giving. So transparency is showing again. Partnerships, collaboration, capacity building, compassion, interesting one. More flexible funding, digitalization. I think we might touch on that too today. Globalization, that's a good word. And advocacy. So again, I think that also reflects this idea of ambition, of also being able to move policies, not just sort of very specific projects, but have an action at a more systemic level. Great. Well, thank you so much for your contributions. That, I mean, this is really, these are great ideas. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce very quickly our panelists today. So we have Luis Driver. Oh, sorry. I've not looked into the good information here. So we have Sarah Rennie, who is the chair of IPASA, the Association of Foundations in South Africa. We're also glad to welcome Atila Roque, who is the Ford Foundation representative in Brazil. We also are glad to welcome Oksana Oracheva, who is the CEO of the Vladimir Potanin Foundation. And finally, we are glad to welcome Yanni Peng, the CEO of the Narada Foundation in China. So I will actually start this panel with the first question. So we'll have 2 or 3 rounds of questions that our panel will respond to. So the first one is really about looking back after 1 year after the outbreak of the pandemic. What are the most interesting trends, innovations, and changes that you've seen in the philanthropic field in your country in response to this crisis? And also, as you respond to my question, please feel free to also illustrate
the response and trends from trends perspective. What new trends we can see in Russia, and I think in other countries, in many, the state, the business, that NGOs are really needed, and NGOs are close to the communities and work with communities for the benefit of all of us. After the COVID situation and last year, we don't need to prove this anymore. I think it's very important achievement that the society in many other countries see the need for NGOs and philanthropy as such. The second trend that I would like to identify is the change in donor-grantee relationship, or donor or recipients and funders relationship, or any other words we use to describe this. And this is not only about power discussion we always have, like about new power discussion, but I think it's much broader issue. Within this trend, we can see the response the donors provide during this year, and coming to our own experience, we built our response around 3 key issues, or 3 key concepts: respond, recover, and rebuild. So our initiatives were designed around these three areas to provide money, flexible money, in order to help organizations and NGOs to respond to the crisis, to become stronger during the crisis, and to recover and start something new. And for us, for example, we found a new slogan could describe these opportunities as help the helpers. We usually help those in need, but those who help those in need also need to be thought about. But this is only one part of donors and grantee relationship, like changing the money organizations receive. It's also started the other type of relationship, how we manage expectations, how we work together, and how we work in partnerships. The third trend will be raising individual philanthropy and participation in different ways, including volunteerism and value and experience in collective action in Russia. We can see it in different ways. And coming from that, the last trend I would like to mention is raising trust. During last 2 years, we can see the decline in trust in different institutions. And in 2020, NGOs or charitable organizations were the only institutions that demonstrated raising trust, significant raising trust within first 5 institutions. And it's something very, very great achievement. We can see that. And it's something that we really need to maintain in the future beyond the crisis. This is the trend we really want to become our everyday situation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Oksana, for these really insightful remarks about the importance of trust and sort of different relationship with grantees, and also the legitimacy of local actors and local civil society, and really providing a crucial complement to other forms of action coming from government, coming from business, and so on. So really great points, and thanks also for staying in time, because we have tight timelines, and so I really appreciate that, so that we can all have some time to express our views. So I'll go next to actually Sarah with the IPASA Association in South Africa. We'd love to hear a little bit about what has been going on in South Africa. We know that you also, and you're still facing an important crisis there with a country that still has important inequalities and issues to address. So it would be great to hear from you about the evolution of the response from the field, and any thoughts you would like to share with us. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much, Benjamin. Yeah, it's interesting to note some of the similarities between the trends in Russia and here in South Africa. I think one of the main trends we saw was there was definitely more joined up philanthropy, if I can call it that, rather than the go it alone model that prevails. And certainly the technology, enabled a very rapid, regular meetings, reaching a much wider audience than we ordinarily would have. And just to give you an example, IPASA convened its first COVID specific response virtual meeting on the 20th of March, which was 15 days after the first COVID case was reported in South Africa, and 5 days after our president declared a national state of disaster. So, from that kind of quick response, we continued to convene regular meetings, really focusing on assisting philanthropists to understand the science of the virus, to understand its immediate impact on society and the social services, including the NGO services, particularly around education and early childhood development, where schools were closed, creches were closed, and also to help direct philanthropists towards opportunities to respond really quickly with effective funding. So this resulted in a much better alignment on critical needs and priorities, and also on new collaborations between donors and this rapid allocation of resources. So that was one of the areas we saw. I think the other interesting thing, especially reflecting a year later, was I believe there was a willingness to take greater risks in giving, and supporting new ideas, and to do it much more quickly than we ordinarily would. So one big obvious one was the Solidarity Fund, which was established very quickly. It attracted a significant funding, a lot of that funding going towards health interventions, humanitarian relief efforts such as food, and a kind of an awareness behavioral change programs. The other one was the South African Futures Trust, which was established very quickly by Oppenheimer Generations, and they innovatively partnered with 6 national banks in South Africa to distribute interest-free loans to small and medium enterprises, and extended soft loans which to nearly 10,000 small and medium enterprises in South Africa. And this facilitated direct payments to nearly 100,000 employees. So given, small businesses had shut down, I think it was a huge support, and it's actually continues to operate. There were other practice innovations around food voucher schemes, research boot camps, which provided for real-time research on COVID, and specific funding for connectivity, especially for NGOs, quickly raising those kinds of funds. And then lastly, I think really a point that Oksana's already mentioned, a trend was to see that change in funding practice. IPASA produced guidelines for funders in COVID, and it was, recommending the kinds of ideas that were spoken about: flexible funding, responsive funding, really understanding the needs of NGOs. So that's the start. I'll stop there. Thanks, Benjamin.
That's a very dense start, Sarah. Lots of food for thought here, and really, actually, I learned a lot listening to you about some of these innovations, and really interesting to see that trend also of increasing collaboration in the field. I think that's one of the really key issues that we're seeing. Past research globally have shown that I think 60% of foundations do not collaborate. And that there's a real opportunity here to make more impact by joining hands. And so it's good to see that in South Africa that the COVID has served as an accelerator for that, but also hearing some of your innovations around research boot camps, food vouchers, and so on. That was really interesting. Thank you so much, Sarah. First, I'd like to apologize because I omitted to mention when I introduced the speakers, one of our eminent speakers, Ashwini Saxena, the CEO from the GSW Foundation in India. So really sorry, Ashwini, for that. Actually, I wanted to ask you maybe to come next to tell us about what has been the response to COVID-19 in India. I was referring a bit earlier to the huge gaps around the SDGs in India. So now this is just, I think, growing with the current crisis. We've seen lots of reaction in the India philanthropic field, which is again growing fast. So please tell us a little bit about the response in the field, and also about maybe some of your work in India. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Benjamin. In India, yes, I think the way it hit COVID across all locations across the globe, I think it's the same challenge that we also faced. First, there was a sense of denial that how can this be there? But I think as a fast-growing economy, the bigger challenge that we faced was the migratory labor, which was into a lot of these, everyone in coordination with each other. The first response was, towards making sure that people do have the basic things in place in terms of knowing, that they are all stranded in a sense. So I think that was the first key response, which was, I would say, articulated and well coordinated by everyone. I think, in such cases of epidemic or pandemic, whatever we call it, it's always, the first important thing for making sure that people's safety and their basic, food requirements and all those issues are taken care of. Then there was, I would say, a big, massive, and every day, this COVID thing was evolving. It was in such a big, diverse country like India, where there's such a big migration of labor from one state to the other. This became a major issue as to how people should be taken care of. Corporations, foundations like us, we also, pitched into it. There was a lot of collaboration on health, I would say. So when I speak of our foundation, I'm actually also speaking on behalf of all the other similar kind of foundations or trusts, which operate in the country on behalf of the various, corporates. So a lot of collaboration with the state government, to ramp up the health facilities, to start looking at how the basic provisioning of, safety equipment can be ensured, how preventive and curative healthcare facilities can be immediately come up. We are stranded even today, with 2 COVID, I would say, hospitals on the either sides of our office building, making sure that, provisions are made very quickly for people to be taken care of. Isolation centers were immediately created. So a whole lot of things did happen. But as this whole thing settled down and, the challenge of COVID and people started learning how to behave with this new pandemic, I think a lot of change that has started happening is that banks had come up with very specific loan schemes and waiver of loan schemes for women self-help groups in the villages working there. For MSME sector, there were a number of SOPs given by the government. We worked very closely with our supply chain partners. We are into steel manufacturing, we are into cement and paints. So we worked very closely. There was a lot of innovation around the business itself. So factories like ours, which were mainly into paint manufacturing, immediately reached out to the government saying that we can actually produce more sanitizers as required if you can give us the basic approvals. So a lot of companies, who were into chemical manufacturing, who were into paint manufacturing, they immediately responded to the requirement of a much larger quantity of sanitizers in a country in India where sanitizers are not a part of our daily life in that sense. So a lot of work went around that, and immediately packaging and all those things were taken care of. So a lot of business response to the pandemic, I would say, happened. Of late, a number of studies have been carried out in the country. I'm also privy to at least a few of them, where the whole skill portfolio, people's employability, which is of so much importance, is being tackled at 2 fronts. One, people who have migrated back to the villages, how they can be gainfully employed in their villages so that that kind of a migration may not be required again. 2, what kind of facilities need to be created in those urban centers or quasi-urban centers where some labor would still be required for these factories to function, for steel to be produced, for cement to be manufactured. So that's the second lens, on which a number of organizations have collaborated together. And when I say collaboration is about companies cutting across various sectors also. So IT company partnering with somebody like us, and we partnering with the government, and so on and so forth. So I think this is I would say, the coping mechanism that is being developed in the country around skills, around employability, around health, around basic health facilities. We had a significant challenge when it came to having the right kind of ventilators. So a lot of innovation happened. Mechanical companies like us, which were into engineering field, we did a lot of innovations, came up with quick makeshift ventilators as required. So I think the business response was phenomenal. Yes, given the complexity of the country, it could have been much well coordinated than what is currently today. But I think a whole range of organizations are coming together, and it was good to see that somebody was talking about collaboration. A lot of collaboration between the private sector and the voluntary organizations and philanthropies like us, and government's active support, it happened. And in terms of mobilization of resources, I think a lot of corporates, including ours, came forward to put in the resources at the discretion of the government to take care of wherever there were requirements. So I think I would stop at that.
Thank you so much, Ashwini. That's a great big picture of what has been the response of the philanthropy field, I think, in India. And I think, again, we see lots of similarities with what was mentioned earlier around bigger, more collaboration. And also, I think this prominent role of business is important. It's also something we can find in data. I think the data that is limited, but the one that we have about this philanthropic response shows that corporations' response has been leading the way in terms of volumes. So that's interesting to hear. And also our philanthropic field, and there are a number of organizations that are trying to support that growth and the effectiveness and the coordination, but there's still a big infrastructure gap in India, and so that will be interesting to discuss about that. So the next speaker I'd like to invite to share her perspective is Yanni Peng. Of course, China is where this whole pandemic started, and this response was extremely effective on your side, both from private and public sector. So we would really love to hear from you, Yanni, on the response of philanthropy in China, and maybe any specific highlights of your own response at the Narada Foundation.
Okay, thank you, Benjamin. I've seen some similarities between the other countries just mentioned in Russia, South Africa, India, and here in China. And I think the response from the whole society is huge, really phenomenal. We've seen a lot of response from the business sector in China. Actually, Benjamin, you mentioned according to Yishan, there was a $5 billion donation for COVID-19, and the majority came from the business sector. The trends I see at the most significant is collaboration, also very similar to other countries. I've seen the collaboration between the NGO sector, within the NGO sector, and between the NGOs and the business sector, between the NGOs and volunteers, and also a lot of students and media. And within the sector, I can example is from the establishment of the China NGO Consortium for COVID-19. It is a collaborative mechanism to respond to COVID-19. And this was established on the 2nd of February last year. And it is to coordinate the Chinese philanthropy and NGOs response to the pandemic. And Narada Foundation is behind this initiative. And there are it's about over 68, I think it's almost 70 organizations within this network. And this includes leading foundations in China, academic organization, and issue-based NGOs, and a lot of local networks, local hubs, and some voluntary organizations across the country. And so this is a joint effort of the whole sector. The pandemic first came from Hubei province, Wuhan. So there are a lot of response to help the NGOs, also to help the local people to respond to the COVID-19 in Hubei. And there are a lot of foundations outside Hubei province. We set up new projects to support the Hubei NGOs. And about 17 foundations in China, we collaborate with each other to support NGOs in Hubei. For example, some issue-based foundation, they will support the activity funding for the NGOs working in Hubei, and Narada Foundation will support the running cost of NGOs in Hubei. And the second interesting trend, I think, is the technology, also mentioned by other panelists. We've seen the technology, the huge power in terms of enabling the response. There are a lot of action is beyond the boundary of organizations. So people just come together on the internet, and we use technology to collaborate with each other. And so these people can get together very quickly. And after they finish the task, they just dismiss. And so at the third trend is that we come back to see the importance of volunteer spirit. And I think the volunteers action is maybe the quickest in terms of responding to the COVID-19, even quicker than the NGOs. Because when you have an organization, you always need to go through a internal procedure to start your initiative. But for normal people, for the volunteer, they can just go out and to respond to have some actions. I think I will stop here, and maybe we can have some further discussion later in the later rounds. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Yanni. That's very impressive, and I think that these coordination efforts that you're mentioning are really, really promising. I think because that's really how maybe the situation fosters this type of new bridges and articulation, and hopefully that they can be then maintained over time, not just as a response, but also as a way of doing the work on the long term. And I really also found your last point very interesting about how technology is facilitating collaboration and sort of these very reactive, very agile responses with experts coming together on one issue and then sort of going to another issue, another community, and then also the same agility and responsiveness with volunteers. So that's very, very interesting point. Thank you so much. And so last but not least, I would like to invite Atila Roque from the Ford Foundation, so representing Ford in Brazil, which is now, and I'm also speaking now from Brazil, where Wings, the Global Wings Network is based. So we're right in the middle of the crisis, and now the main hub globally in terms of the pandemic. And we've also seen lots of great innovations and response. So please let us know about what you've seen as main trends and your own work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Benjamin. And I think this first great round of intervention has shown how much in common, actually, in spite of our difference, how much in common actually we have as a sector within our countries. So I could keep going on and listening and appreciating what has been said so far. To be quick, I would say that we should recognize that in moment of deep crisis, as one I experience today, leaders, institutions, individuals, they somehow are invited to show their best and sometimes the worst, right, of their nature. So it was not different now, and I think it was not different with the philanthropic sector in the world, and particularly in Brazil. Take responsibility for our own place of privilege and for our own place of power. I think that's one of the first dimensions which become really immediately clear that that is very important for the sector to recognize from where we speak from. So that's one dimension. I think that another important dimension, again, taking account the deep inequality which we exist with, the pandemic and the COVID has not affected everyone in an equal manner. Doesn't matter how much universal and neutral we could say the virus may be, but actually the poor, the marginalized, Black people of colors and indigenous people, women, are definitely the most impacted. And if after a year now, if you look at the data in Brazil, who has been paying the higher price in terms of causalities, in terms of death, in terms of lack of access to vaccines, in terms of the impact of the economic crisis and the loss of job, etc., it's definitely a very clear map of our worst and most terrible inequality, which come from racism, from the land concentration, gender discrimination, etc. So in that context, in the context where we have to show the best or the worst, and the context where the strikes of inequality are so clear, the sector in Brazil, and I would say that's one of the most interesting, and Benjamin has mentioned in the beginning of his speech how much the COVID has also come together with a boost for the sector in many ways. The sector in Brazil was invited, and I think took this invitation well, to review its priorities, to review its methods, and also was invited to reach out to new partnerships beyond our comfort zones, let's say like that. So in many of those dimensions are similar to what we have heard in other countries. We were invited to look for increased levels of cooperation. We were challenged to improve our mechanism of building trust. So a lot of unpredictable dialogues start to happen and continues to happen between the sector and different other sectors of the society. That has been so important to create this environment of trust. And third, we also invited, and I think the sector is taking that well, doesn't matter how difficult sometimes it is in a circumstance where we don't have the same. So again, when you get out of your comfort zone, we experience a level of uncertainty, true or not, but a level of uncertainty which we need to be prepared to. So I may stop here, but there are several examples where we can see that level, three levels happening. But I want to stick to my maximum of 4 or 5 minutes. So
thank you so much, Atila. No, that's fascinating, and I think your remarks at the same time reinforce some of what has been said already, but also brings another dimension, which is really integrating this reflection on COVID response to the more structural issues in society, especially around inequalities, power distribution, and I think that's a really interesting call, and I feel like there's a question on how do we bridge this kind of approach and sort of systemic change approach with also all the power of what was illustrated earlier around quick response, working with volunteers, leveraging technology, boosting individual giving. And so I feel like there's almost a whole reflection to have about how to connect the two and use the power of technology, quick response, business capacity, etc., and how we plug it into a bigger agenda to address the root causes of some of the issues that are underlying also this current crisis and exacerbating the consequences of this crisis. Thank you very much, Atila. And so actually, I think that the whole discussion really highlighted, we were talking about collaboration, partnership with unusual suspects, changing the way we work. So that means like a proper reflection on the way philanthropy operates and a proper reflection on how we can harness the power of philanthropy and accelerate the impact beyond the sort of business as usual of philanthropy. And so this is directly linked to the question of the ecosystem that supports philanthropy, or the infrastructure that supports philanthropy, the network, the research, the teaching, collaboration, connections, etc., which tends to be very much overlooked everywhere in the world. And I would say even more in emerging economies, where of course the sort of direct needs are so critical and pressing that philanthropies tend to just focus on delivering results as much as possible for communities. But then there is a big gap in terms of building this ecosystem that can bring about the systemic change, that can bring about a much bigger collective impact. And so that's the next question I have for you. And it's really to see, do you think that the COVID crisis is increasing the awareness of private donors and foundations on the importance to invest in their collective impact and all these field enablers? And what do you think ecosystem champions like you can do to grow and to improve that ecosystem in your context? And so, well, I was already raising the point with Ashwini about India. So maybe Ashwini, I'd like to invite you to respond first to that question, and then we'll move to our other colleagues. But please let us know how you see this from an Indian perspective.
Thank you, Benjamin. I think, yes, the COVID has put the spotlight on the kind of collaboration that is required, the kind of awareness that needs to be in place in the public domain for all these challenges, which certainly cannot be, handled alone, either by government or voluntary organizations or, even the corporate sector. So I think, in terms of building of awareness around collaboration, yes, it's very much there. What are the key areas that have been identified for collaboration? If I can tell you from the Indian experience, one is, as I said, around the health initiatives and use of technology in terms of how health initiatives can be taken up, how health services can be passed on to people. That's, I think, one area in which a broader ecosystem is evolving over a period of time. The second one that I told you about is very interestingly the skill development and the employability ecosystem. So a whole range of organizations trying to look at how talent can be, understood, mapped, and linked to the local ecosystem so that job opportunities or self-employment opportunities can be created for them. So that's the second element where a lot of collaboration, as I mentioned in the beginning itself also, is being looked at. The third aspect on which I think a lot of collaboration is in the process, and I think it's being led by the government, is to look at all innovations which are going to be useful for containing this pandemic. And I think the best example is the way vaccination process has started in the country, and in such large numbers, vaccination has been started, and I think India has been providing support to the other countries also for taking care of vaccination. And so a whole lot of researchers, are going around, and these are being, put forward for public and private sector investment. Government has relaxed a number of rules where even as a corporate social responsibility guidelines, we have leeway to, look at the awareness building around COVID, look at how resources can be deployed for some of these innovations. Another element that has opened up, and I think which has brought to highlight, is the development of the health ecosystem, especially, and I would say the sanitation and the waste management piece. So I think that's another piece on which a lot of collaboration I can see now happening. We as a foundation have taken up this as one of our national causes, which I think is actually opening up a whole range of things which were perhaps being neglected at some point of time. That how basic sanitation itself, if it can be taken care of, it is going to take care of a lot of issues related to EME pandemic, whether it's COVID or maybe something else which may be there and looming in future of humanity. So I think in that sense, I would say a lot of ecosystem is developing and is being nurtured around that. I believe that sorry.
Yeah, no, thank you, Ashwini. I just wanted to. I thought you were done with your remarks. So I was about to move on. But if you have a last key point, please just go ahead and share it. Sorry.
No, perfect. I was just about to finish that. Thank you so much.
Great. That's sorry then. Thank you very much. And yes, I think it's just really reinforcing how much new collaborations are happening, and then being able to serve the field then at a more systemic level. So on the same question, really about the infrastructure for philanthropy for the sector, and how to increase the sector's impact, and how to grow more philanthropy and to make philanthropy more effective through this ecosystem, through this infrastructure. I wanted to ask you, Sarah, how these questions are evolving in South Africa. You're leading. I mean, you're the chair of the main association in South Africa that brings together philanthropic actors. And I know it's not always easy to find support and investments, to bring about that collaboration, to bring about the data, the research, the teaching, all that is needed for impact. And so, do you think that this COVID crisis is bringing any sort of change in mindset around funders and maybe more ready to invest in this type of work?
So, Benjamin, I think my short answer is to some extent. To some extent it is. And I think certainly in the midst of the crisis, I think that urge to collaborate and be more connected was greater. And I have a sense that perhaps as this becomes more normalized, some of that urgency will drop. So I think there is definitely, and certainly within the membership, I think there is a better awareness of the collective impact of an association such as IPASA. And certainly it was one of our most vibrant and active years, the last year. And I expect that vibrancy and that activity to continue. However, really scaling up with new members remains challenging, even when our fees are on average about 0.5% of a foundation's annual spend. So when you're looking at the totality of what they spend and you think, okay, 0.5% difference to stay at the micro level, to work with the NGOs that they know about the causes that they care about. So what can we do about that, which is your second question? Look, I think, again, technology is a huge opportunity for us to lower costs of associating. People don't need to fly. They don't need to book hotels. They can come in. And at IPASA, we've tried to be flexible between opening up a number of our online events to non-members, as well as having closed membership events, to try and bring that inclusivity of all philanthropic actors, you know, being able to participate. I also think that, and I hope we don't have to do this work alone, because I think it's quite obvious, that increasingly there's a sense of the interconnectivity of issues. If you look at the climate crisis as one, so what our job, I think, is to increasingly repeat the message that if you care about your cause, you have to understand its connectivity to a myriad of other issues, a myriad of other social and environmental issues. And so to succeed in your cause, you don't have to fund everything, but you need to open your eyes and be more connected. So I think that is some of the messages that can be effective to draw people into a more collaborative way of working.
Thank you, Sarah. Well, I will take the glass half full and hear that, you know, you see more vibrancy, you see things evolving, and you see an opportunity, and we see it too. I think that things are moving, and actually we published a joint article with the Secretary General of Civicus, the global CSO network, and the Vice President at TechSoup and myself, to call on funders to, you know, understand differently these issues, because I think your point is important. Like you were saying, well, we can lower cost, but I think it's mainly about your second point. Like, we need to change the narrative. We need to change the understanding that it's not about taking away resources from the needs. It's actually investing in having more impact to solve these issues. And so that's a really important point. And I think we'll share in the chat this article so that you can react as well. I see that time is running, so maybe I'll take a last answer from our panel on that question, but then I might move directly after that to the last question, which I think is really critical on sort of the global leadership role. And so maybe I'll keep this last question for Yanni and Oksana, who I know are really trying also to bring these new ideas and models, you know, emerging from Russia on the one hand, from China on the other hand, in the global market, in the global sphere, through Wings, that you're partnering with, and through other platforms. But before we get there, I'd like to ask maybe Atila to also share his views, because on this infrastructure and ecosystem questions, because I think in Brazil, a lot of the innovations that we've seen happening in terms of response and this incredible mobilization has been possible because there is actually a quite strong infrastructure in Brazil of networks, of even tech platforms that facilitate donations. We also have ABCR that has been tracking donations, so we have data. So all of that is just really because some funders at some point have said, you know, we need to invest in this. And so Atila, what is your perspective, and do you see this also getting stronger and stronger in Brazil now with the COVID crisis?
Thanks, Benjamin. Yes, definitely. If you look at the Brazilian history and experience of the sector over the last decades, you'll see that we have been investing quite, I will not say a lot, but in an important way towards to build some common ground for the sector to work together. And in that context, we built this association called GIF, which bring together, it's a kind of umbrella association to bring together the variety of institutions, foundations, and private donors that we have in the country, at least the most relevant one. In the context of COVID, that has shown to be absolutely essential, because that was that was the structure, the infrastructure of the sector, which provide us with the platform and the condition to engage with the broader society system of civil society, of government, of other actors, which were looking for ways to respond to the situation. So I think the fact that we had a place where we could gather for instance, to build trust through exchange of experience, through experience of success, but also failures, to learn together from what we are doing, especially in the context of so much new dimension being put in place for the sector, a place where you could coordinate the sharing and coordinate the actions was so important. As I told before, it was a moment where we were invited to expose ourselves to new risks, in a sense, to try new mechanisms, to move towards new partnership. So to have a common platform where we could process together the learnings from this kind of moment was absolutely essential. And I think that, let's see, it's not a given. Let's see, because we are talking about a long hold, a long-term kind of crisis. It's not going away soon. There's another many other dimensions to be taken account. So my hope, and I believe that there is a higher level of consciousness within the sector that we need more than ever to strengthen our infrastructure to be able to continue to do this together. So I think there is today a trend. I hope, maybe I'm combining hope and analysis here. But I think there is a trend of increased investment in grant making, in funding projects, in support infrastructure in general, but also in investing in a more consistent infrastructure and conversation within the sector. So I'll stop.
Thank you very much, Atila. That's encouraging. And I've based in Brazil, I've seen again, like in action with this COVID crisis, all this ecosystem and everything is producing. Actually, lots more actually is starting now. And because there are also a few even individual investors, Brazilian wealth holders that, like Eli Orn and others that I've said, we need to build the field to have more impact. And I think we have equivalents, for example, in India of like, some people like Amit Chandra who also invest massively in the infrastructure, in the ecosystem, but still we see gap. And I think that, in India, one of the gaps we've seen with this response is that I think that hundreds of millions of dollars have been donated by foundations and private donors to government funds. I think the main reason is that there was no real alternative, because on the ground, the infrastructure was not built for local CSOs and grassroots organizations to absorb that, while they are starving and really needing these resources to make a difference on the front line and on the ground. So again, this infrastructure question is not a cost, sort of a contractual question, is really a question of impact and impact at scale. So thank you for your remarks on that. So I really want to, as I mentioned, to keep a bit of time for our last question. And so I think will be particularly interesting to hear also from Oksana and Yanni on that last question. And so let me introduce that. And I touched on that point earlier, including through my introduction. But I think that we're seeing the rise of innovative big philanthropies, as in Bellegy in India, Jack Ma in China, on the one hand. On the other hand, we see a fast growth of the mass middle class and community giving in emerging markets. And so it seems like there are new models and new narratives that are emerging from these parts of the world, and new capacity as well. And so I'm wondering if these models maybe could become sources of inspiration among themselves, of course, among the BRICS, like we're discussing today, but also across the globe. But yet today, the vast majority of emerging philanthropies are entirely domestically focused. And so I'm wondering, is it time for emerging philanthropies to become more engaged on the international scene, both in terms of investments, but also in terms of thought leadership? and in a way, like mirroring the ambition of the BRICS institution, like to build an alternative and emerging diplomatic voice, diplomatic leadership, can we also imagine that the BRICS philanthropy could sort of develop an alternative, emerging global source of new thinking and new practice? And so that's my question to. Well, first I'd like to maybe to invite Oksana to tell us a little bit what she thinks about that. And I know that Oksana, you're partnering with Wings, and I know that you have insights on these questions. So please share them with us, and then I'll ask the same question to Yanni. Thank you.
Thank you, Benjamin. And I think this question is in a way a provocative one, because we need to answer ourselves, what does it mean to be more international? We traditionally think about international dimension of philanthropy around the money flow from north to south, from west to east. But does it really an internalization we are thinking of? It's probably more about philanthropy market or something like that, but it's not a true international dimension of what philanthropy can do. So for this perspective, it's not surprisingly that domestic philanthropy, that BRICS philanthropy is more domestic than classical traditional philanthropy we have in other countries. And the other reason why it's not surprising is that the BRICS countries or emerging philanthropy countries are developing philanthropy in a much more speedy way. We are actually missing several steps from classical historical philanthropy, let's say Anglo-Saxon model philanthropy of the States or of the UK. And we are coming to the philanthropy which is more engaged from the very beginning through technology, and we have discussed this already, where the giving is done in a different way when we involve bigger amounts of people into philanthropy and volunteering and all the other things on the one hand, and where business is playing a crucial role in philanthropy development on the other. And from what we discussed already, we can see how much business money are involved in developing philanthropy in our countries. So that's a kind of a background. And a few years ago, and I was trying to recall when, and I think it was 2013, a number of foundations, including us and a number of other Russian foundations, but not only Russian, started an Emerging Societies, Emerging Philanthropies Forum, where actually we were trying to discuss the specific BRICS countries' agenda. And the first question was, is there this specific agenda? And I'm quite convinced that yes, we do have our own agenda, and we need to look on the international dimension from what we are doing, not only through money eyes. We need to think about common learning, and this is already we can see through this webinar we are participating right now. We can see common trends, we can see common solutions. So this is a very different way of internationalization. And we can see that we can combine national and international dimension, not through the same, for the same tradition of bridging our countries we represent with the other world. So promoting our agenda beyond our boundaries, a little bit different way to approach that. And the third thing where we really think have our own agenda, I would say it relates to development of social innovation, social businesses, social enterprise. From what we can see in our countries, we again moved very quickly from the areas where we really helped those who are in need in the way of providing, let's say, fish, into the way where we provide how to solve problems ourselves. And we can see how quickly small social enterprises are developing in our countries. And this is also part of philanthropy infrastructure. And we need to reflect on that. So what kind of different types of solutions we have and what is interesting for others. And the last point I would like to mention, again, coming to my first one, is that when we think about international dimension, we usually think about few very big foundations or corporate foundations or private foundations. If we think about a majority of philanthropic organizations in all other countries, they also work mostly domestically, either within their communities, regions, or at national level. But still, they have something together. Otherwise, we won't have international associations. So I think this is where we need to see our unique role, and also to change the language of philanthropy from classical traditional power language into new language we all need. Probably I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Oksana. That's brilliant, and really, you know, I appreciate also the sort of the double dimension of the potential to also share among BRICS countries, which has, you know, although very, very different specific context, but a number of similarities, probably much more similarity than maybe with, you know, the US or the UK that you mentioned. And so that's the first level. And then maybe also, as you were concluding now, about, you know, sourcing new ideas and new language to rethink philanthropy, because it's not like philanthropy is perfect in the North or in the West. I think that, you know, there is a crisis of legitimacy and a crisis of identity almost for a number of philanthropic actors in these regions that are wondering about their role in society, their legitimacy, and big questions about how, you know, democratic they are, how transparent, and so on. And so I think also that will be very beneficial to let's say older or more traditional institutional philanthropy fields to be fed with new ideas coming from emerging markets and with new narratives and new approaches. So thanks for sharing that, Oksana. And so now coming to Yanni, I'm sure you also have lots of thoughts in China, which obviously is you know, has a great potential also to provide leadership and thought leadership and new funding possibly across the globe. And so with such an important new wealth being created every year, including in the year of a pandemic. And so what are your thoughts on that, Yanni? Do you think that the Chinese philanthropy sector is willing and ready to get to that level?
I think the short answer is definitely not ready to get to that level. At least for me, I think for Narada Foundation, I think we are not in a position to think about to act as a global leader in to fulfill the global leadership role. What we are thinking is still to have more and more interactive peer learning with our peers in other countries. And I think this is a co-evolving process for all the philanthropies and all the NGOs and foundations in different countries. I remember when I had the interview with Alina from Russia, I was amazed by the similarities from China and from other BRICS countries. And I think this is the basis for at least the BRICS countries to have more interactions, more exchanges to learn from each other, and also to try to figure out the solutions together. Maybe I can give you an example of what we are doing in terms of scaling up. In China, you know, Narada Foundation, we initiated the effective philanthropy multiplier in 2016. And at that time, we actually wanted to help the very effective philanthropy projects to be more to have more have bigger and deeper impact. And we read the article from SSIR, Stanford Social Innovation Review, and there was a piece about scaling up. So basically, we applied that methodology to China, and during the past 4 years, from based our practice, actually all the projects have explored different ways for scaling up. So that is why we want to share our learning with the with the peers in other countries, and so we published the article together with Wings, and this to show that what is happening in China. And for the for the Chinese, our tradition is really to be very humble, and we want to learn from each other. So I would not prefer to say that we want to lead the philanthropy at the global across the globe. We rather to say that we really want to we are eager to learn from each other, and when that the new knowledge is created by the I think it's created jointly. It's really a co-evolving process. And if I would say that one area that maybe China can share more with other countries is the crowdfunding area, because we have those giant tech companies, including Alibaba, Tencent, and now the TikTok in China. The online crowdfunding has developed very quickly, and the result is really amazing. So, for example, the Tencent Foundation launched the September 9th festival 5 years ago, and last year it is a 3 days festival for online fundraising. Last year, the 3 days online the fundraising, they raised about 3 billion RMB, which is around maybe $470 million within 3 days, and about 58 million people donate online. So it's huge, and this is going to be a bigger and bigger part in the whole donation landscape in China, and I think this is is a topic that we can share more with the international peers. Yeah, I will stop here.
Thank you so much, Yanni. That's excellent, and actually I like the clarity of your response. But at the same time, I think that what you're describing after your initial response, that it's not really ready, is actually I think incarnating another form of leadership, which is a listening leadership. Saying that it's about cross-fertilization, about horizontality, and about sort of sharing and learning, and so I think that's really what I had in mind when I was really asking this question. Is like, are we ready to really engage globally in this exercise to learn and also to share? And I think it was interesting to hear about one of the areas where you feel China has really a lot of advance in these sort of fundraising strategies and leveraging technology to generate more funding for civil society. And so I found that really interesting. At Wings, that's really, I mean, I'm saying that because we see it as our role, our mandate as a global philanthropy network, to really give space for all these new ideas, these models, this effective philanthropy multiplier that we were talking about, which is really an interesting and innovative approach to scale solutions in China, about these fundraising models, or about the narrative and the way we think philanthropy. So I think I just wanted to maybe end by a call from our side saying that we are interested in providing more visibility to what's happening there, because we know it can mutually reinforce philanthropic actors everywhere in the globe. Maybe especially first and foremost, I also hear this as sort of a first stage, very relevant space, this BRICS dimension, where there's a lot to learn at the BRICS level between BRICS countries. But also, I think what you can learn at BRICS level really could benefit the rest of the world. So thank you for all these insights, really interesting. So we still have a few minutes that we wanted, of course, to keep for a little bit of Q&A, because we've been speaking. We heard amazing perspectives from our speakers. And so let's now get a few thoughts from all of you. And I'm checking now, of course, the chat box. And so there is one question here. I'd like to know what the presenters think about international collaboration of the sector during COVID. What happened? What can be done in the future? So that's the first question. And then there's another, and maybe I'll just read 2-3 questions, and then I'll let each of you pick whatever you'd like to respond to, and we can keep the discussion a bit more organic. So this first question about, what do you think about international, like really international collaboration for the sector? We've heard a lot about national collaboration. What about international? The other one is, what do the presenters think about, how do you think it is possible to create a joint crowdfunding platform for the BRICS countries? And so, yeah, maybe I'll stop at this stage with these two first questions. And who would like to respond to any of these? Maybe we can start with the international collaboration one.
I can start.
Okay, please, Atila.
No, just to be very, very brief. I think there is no other way out of international collaboration in a sense, considering the level of interdependency we exist today in the world, of international cooperation, the importance of have global spheres of coordination for everyone, for government, for private sector, and also for the philanthropic sector. So I think we should say, yes, we want, and we need to be part of a conversation, very much as my colleague from China was saying. We need to be very humble in terms of to step into this scenario with open ears, with the prepared.
Like to, maybe, I don't know if you would like to respond to this question. I feel like we've also had another one here, which is more about, if the pandemic has changed the strategies of philanthropic entities, the support of education. So maybe this one is a bit specific to close, but I mean, I think we've covered a little bit around the adaptation and the evolution of philanthropic practice. But there was, any other thoughts on this international collaboration, or on the idea of a joint crowdfunding platform, or additional thoughts again on how philanthropy is evolving from I don't know, Ashwini or Sarah, maybe. Yes, Ashwini, please go ahead.
I think I would, pick up from what Atila left. I think it's important for us to build upon that common understanding of the issues and, what we bring on to the table, rather than straight away going on to a crowdfunding, which would have its own lots of legal hassles, if I may put it up front. It is more important to first see how we can learn to collaborate with each other, and collaboration does not necessarily need to be a financial collaboration. I'm sure there is no dearth of resources in any of the big countries. I mean, including all of us put together, each country is quite reliant, self-reliant, I would say, in terms of the resources. It's not about financial resources. It's about, having that faster pace of innovation, which can solve problems across, different partners that we have in this network. I think that's the kind of a first level collaboration which can hasten up this, appetite for learning more from each other, trying out different things for each other, and taking it to the next level where maybe perhaps a crowdfunding kind of an opportunity can evolve. Education, yes, I could hear very briefly what you said, but it's an important area where a lot of innovation is required. If we have to fuel the next generation for our economies to grow fast, we cannot be compromising on education because of the lockdowns that have happened in the countries. So a lot of innovation, technology-led innovation around these areas, I'm sure, would be good to learn from each other and see how it can fit into our own local contexts.
Thank you so much, Ashwini, for these insights. And I see that questions continue to flow in the chat. So I know that we're not going to be able, of course, to cover all of that. But I mean, the good news is that the Russian Donors Forum is leading this project around BRICS philanthropy, and I think they've shared now a link on how to stay in touch, because it's really, I think it has to be just a milestone in the conversation. But I think the exchange today is really showing how much potential there is, that more learning, more sharing among BRICS philanthropic players. We have a number of similar challenges, and so really interesting to see how much more could be shared and maybe could be done as well together. So please stay in touch, I think, with the Russia Donor Forum on that. I think we reached time, and so just to make sure Sasha Boldireva from the Russian Donors Forum can also say a few closing words, because I'm sure, Sasha, that it was a very rich conversation also from your perspective. So we will give you a few minutes so you're able to make the closing remarks. And I would like to thank the Russian Donors Forum and all the panelists and all of you once again for an incredible discussion, and looking forward to staying in touch with all of you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, colleagues. And I would like to speak Russian. Okay. Коллеги, большое спасибо.
Thank you very much. Truly, this was the first meeting of this kind, the first event we do together with our partners. Thank you, Benjamin. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for your contributions. I think it's really important to see how philanthropy works in our countries. It's really important to understand this better. It's really important. At the moment, we are very much focused on domestic issues, and it's really interesting to communicate and share. Yes, we have a lot of links in the chat box, and there's a lot of things we need to review and analyze. I would like to thank once again all the partners who have been supporting our research efforts. I would like to say that we are open for partnership. My colleagues have published a link. If you go to this link, you can share your publications, your articles, your data that you have, and also proposals on cooperation, your ideas, and then we'll take a look and see what works and come up with some new ideas, some bilateral, trilateral things. Wings, all the others, thank you very much. Thank you for being with us today. Thank you for asking questions. And I would like to confirm what Benjamin just said. We will collect all the data in the chat box, review everything, prepare, and we'll prepare future events this year. Thank you very much. Here